Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš had seen their people suffer for years under the cruel iron hands of the Butcher of Prague, Reinhard Heydrich, the ruthless Third Reich's governor of Bohemia and Moravia. They were determined to end that cruel regime on May 27, 1942, on a curve near the Bulovka Hospital in Prague. Both men had trained for months with the British Special Operations Executive Command and were committed to taking the life of Heydrich at the cost of their own. The men had tracked the daily commutes of the German commander and tightened their Sten submachine guns as they heard a Mercedes coming down the road. Gabčík abruptly stepped into the road, his submachine gun ready to take down Heydrich and his driver, but the unexpected happened. His weapon jammed. The Germans, instead of hitting the gas, stopped. Heydrich pulled out his .08 pistol and began firing mercilessly against Gabčík as he rushed for cover. Kubiš, realizing his friend was in danger, lobbed a grenade into the back of the enemy car. A tremendous explosion and a slight concussion followed. The next thing Kubiš remembered was a bloody Heydrich chasing down the two operatives. Their plan had gone wrong. Their lives were at stake. Even worse, in retaliation, the occupying force would unleash its wrath on the population. The German Third Reich and its military had control over most of continental Europe by late 1941. The German war machine had subjugated the West and was about to do the same with the East, with the Wehrmacht closing in fast to take over Moscow. The British and French believed the Soviet Union and Stalin stood no chance against the effective combined arms tactics of the Teutonic commanders and would surrender at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, the Czechoslovak government in exile, led by President Edvard Beneš, faced pressure from British intelligence due to the lack of visible resistance since the German occupation began in October 1938. As part of the Munich Agreement, the Third Reich first began its annexation of Czechoslovakia with the Sudetenland, a former German territory with a population mainly composed of Germans, and then took over the entirety of the country on March 15, 1939. This led to the establishment of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Unlike other occupied countries like Poland, Yugoslavia, and Greece, the Czech lands remained relatively calm and contributed significantly to the German war effort. To inspire the Czechoslovak people and demonstrate their alliance, the exiled government decided to target Reinhard Heydrich, the acting protector of Bohemia and Moravia, known for his brutal rule. This assassination aimed to show senior German officers that they were vulnerable to Allied forces and resistance groups anywhere around Europe. 38-year-old Reinhard Heydrich was the youngest German officer of Hitler's top brass. He embodied all the ideals of the Aryan warrior. He was tall, blonde, athletic, and well-educated in the ideals of the National Socialist Party. After dropping out of the Kriegsmarine, Heydrich joined the Schutzstaffel, or SS, Hitler's elite, under the command of Himmler. Shortly after, he was given command of the Reich's intelligence agencies, such as the Gestapo, due to his unique abilities to enforce law and order within Germany. In September 1941, Heydrich substituted Konstantin von Neurath as governor of Bohemia and Moravia, instantly enforcing a harsh martial law that led to thousands of arrests of everyone who opposed the Reich's regime. Those who resisted were executed. Soon, Heydrich earned nicknames such as the Butcher of Prague and the Hangman, with the Führer even referring to him as the man with the iron heart, as a testament to his determination to enforce the German rule of law without hesitation. The Czech population could not handle it anymore, and the government in exile decided to act fast and without mercy. In October 1941, František Moravec, the exiled chief of Czech intelligence under the approval of President Beneš, approached the British Special Operations Executive, the acclaimed Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, with the unique proposal: erase Heydrich from the map. The Britons had been insisting on increasing the Czech resistance against the Reich's regime, and Moravec was providing them with a more dramatic solution: wiping off one of the highest-ranking officers in the Third Reich. Brigadier Colin Gubbins, tasked with organizing the guerrilla in the region, was all in for the idea, for he knew that eliminating the Butcher of Prague would bolster the morale of the Czech resistance. Nonetheless, this was a double-edged sword. Morale would be boosted, but the German reprisals against the population would be severe. Still, President Beneš, knowing that if he did not act fast, the communist Czechs would overthrow him in the eyes of the Allied forces, gave the green light. Thus, Operation Anthropoid was born. Bearing the Greek word used in zoology to describe something that resembled the form of a human, top-secret preparations began in mid-October 1941. The Czech government wanted the special operatives to be either Czech or Slovak to show their people they were not alone. Of the more than 2,000 exile soldiers living in Britain, the SOE underwent a rigorous selection and only chose 24 men for specialized training at Aveseg in Scotland. Only 2 men stood out from the elite operators: Warrant Officer Josef Gabčík, a Slovak, and Jan Kubiš, a Czech. Once the men were given their false documents, they hopped aboard 2 aircraft to take them to their homeland and cleanse their land from the enemy leader. Gabčík and Kubiš were not alone in their difficult mission. The other 7 men accompanying them split into 2 different RAF aircraft that took off from Halifax and were bound for Pilsen. Heavily armed, but disguised as locals, the men were ultimately parachuted at Novice, east of Prague, due to navigation problems. Concealed and protected by the local guerrilla force, Gabčík, Kubiš, and the rest of the squad discreetly made their way to Pilsen, where they planned the attack. Gabčík and Kubiš, with the support of several families infiltrated with the occupying forces, first envisioned a daring ambush on a train to eliminate the notorious Heydrich. Still, the plan proved unfeasible upon closer scrutiny. Undiscouraged, they hatched a second plan, a forest road trip where a taut cable would halt Heydrich's car journey from his residence to the city. Yet, after hours of anticipation, their leader, Lieutenant Adolf Opalka, summoned them back to the city's heart, leaving them to contemplate a third and final strategy within Prague's walls. Heydrich's vulnerability lay in his daily commute from his country home to Prague headquarters. Despite warnings, he frequently traveled in an open-top Mercedes, unescorted, presenting a prime opportunity for the operation. This was the only option. Gabčík and Kubiš were informed they had to act fast. The deadline was set for May 27, 1942. Intelligence speculated Heydrich would leave Prague the next day, and there would not be another chance to strike him down. It was now or never. The time had come. Gabčík and Kubiš armed themselves during the early hours of May 27, 1942. Gabčík concealed a British Sten submachine gun under an overcoat, while Kubiš carried a briefcase with a grenade as a backup. Another parachutist, Josef Valčík, served as a lookout to inspect the road where they would intercept their target. The Butcher of Prague began his daily commute at approximately 10:30 a.m. The ambush was awaiting him in a tight curve next to the tram stop of the Bulovka Hospital. Impatient and tense minutes followed, the men drenching sweat but focused on the operation, each strategically positioned to corner the enemy when he showed up. The rumble of a car sent Gabčík and Kubiš back to reality. A green, open-top Mercedes 320 convertible B was approaching. It was Heydrich. He was closing in fast. Gabčík pulled out his Sten SMG and prepared for action. Kubiš did the same. He checked his grenade inside the briefcase and awaited the result. As soon as the elegant Mercedes slowed down and Gabčík saw both driver and passenger, he stepped out in the open and aimed. Then the unexpected happened. His SMG was jammed. He could not shoot, and panic struck Gabčík when he realized the Mercedes abruptly stopped under Heydrich's orders, instead of rushing away from the scene. The Butcher of Prague then stood up, pulled out his Luger, and began firing at Gabčík with accurate shots that flew dangerously close to him. Realizing his comrade was in peril, Kubiš realized it was time for Plan B and rushed toward the Mercedes, throwing the grenade as close to it as possible, before SS Oberscharführer Klein, the driver, began firing at him. The anti-tank grenade fragments ripped through the car's right rear bumper, with shrapnel and fibers from the upholstery striking Heydrich's body. Kubiš, too, was injured, but quickly recovered from the ground and ran straight from his bicycle while firing at the targets with his Colt 1903 pistol. Impressively enough, the Butcher of Prague was still on his feet and, eager for retribution, pursued Kubiš while the driver went after Gabčík. One thing was sure: the operation had failed, and the hammer of retribution would fall upon the innocent population. Klein quickly returned from his failed attempt to catch the operators. Bleeding heavily, Heydrich, driven by fury, ordered Klein to chase down Gabčík on foot before collapsing and realizing he was wounded. Klein pursued Gabčík into a nearby butcher shop, but as he closed in, Gabčík turned and fired his pistol, hitting Klein twice in the leg and leaving him severely wounded. Gabčík then slipped away, disappearing into the city via a tram and going to a safe house. Both Gabčík and Kubiš, unaware of the extent of Heydrich's injuries, believed the mission had failed. But it was far from over. Off-duty policemen took the wounded Heydrich to Bulovka Hospital, where local doctors attended him, but his condition was already dire. He suffered from a collapsed lung, a torn diaphragm, a fractured rib, and a broken spleen. Despite these severe injuries, doctors initially believed the resilient Heydrich would survive. But days later, while eating lunch, Heydrich suddenly collapsed and slipped into a coma. The hangman never regained consciousness, and the autopsy revealed that sepsis, a severe complication from infection, had ultimately claimed his life. Upon learning of the loss, Hitler's wrath fell upon the Czech population, as the government in exile had expected from the very start. Over 13,000 civilians related to the insurgents were arrested and sent to concentration camps before being intensely interrogated by the German police. Over 5,000 of these captives would perish as a result of Heydrich's assassination. German intelligence from the Gestapo soon concluded the village of Lidice was concentrating a large portion of the insurgents and decided to act fast. Men, women, and children were expelled from the town and sent to concentration camps before the place was burned to the ground. The Germans then gathered information from Karel Čurda, one of the men who parachuted with the operatives and betrayed his comrades to spare his family. Gabčík, Kubiš, and the rest of the operatives were hiding in an Orthodox church in central Prague when over 700 SS soldiers surrounded them on June 18, 1942. Gabčík, Kubiš, and the resistance fighters knew there was no way out and fought like madmen in a heroic last stand. One by one, they began to fall until the SS stormed the church and made their way to the crypt. The surviving men, including Gabčík, decided to take their own lives before surrendering. The mission had been accomplished, but at a significant cost. Many innocent lives were lost in the reprisals. Gabčík and Kubiš were heroes, but the Allies would never attempt another assassination throughout the war. In other words, the cost was too great for innocent people to suffer so much pain.